Bye.
I know how sad that is, but people drink this stuff up. Put that at the beginning.
Welcome back to week 5. And this week, we're going to talk about don't do what you hate. Take it away, Dad.
A lovely intro, Esther. You must have loved that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. Very good. This is probably the shortest chapter of the book, certainly the shortest one we've read so far. And if chapter 3 was about relationship advice, I would say this is about career advice, more about careers. Would you agree? Anyone agree with that? Do I hear an amen?
Amen.
I think that's the easiest application, absolutely. But I think it is more than that.
Yeah. But
It was his main application, right?
Yeah.
yeah. So what's more than just being career advice?
Well, I think you could be in social setups where you don't like certain things or you don't want to be engaged and you would prefer to not be or not be coerced or
Become complicit.
I remember first coming to Hong Kong, there was a group of friends that I liked hanging out with, but they liked to do things that I didn't enjoy. And so on a very small scale, I had to go, no, I don't want to do that. I won't hang out with you whilst you're doing that.
Okay.
Orgies, basically orgies.
You don't want to do that?
I thought you liked it.
Actually, here's the truth. They were having prayer meetings.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go. So part of the social construct was, oh, you have to come to the prayer meeting. And I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I had to go, I don't like this. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't want to do it. And so I was the black sheep of that friend group. But I just had to face it and go, I hate going to these things.
Okay. Because you do like going to prayer meetings generally, if it's a good prayer meeting.
It was just the specific thing with the specific way that they did things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that can be the most boring meetings in church.
Yeah.
Parties.
But I would say that in this chapter, Peterson doesn't really delve into mythology too much or outside of basically, I would say nearly all of it, the practical advice is about sorting out your career. And what amazed me about it was that he used an example of a woman who didn't like what her company was doing and didn't know whether to tackle it or not. And he said, just make yourself invaluable. And eventually she left and got a better job. But what amazed me was that he didn't use himself as an example. Because he was a university professor that some Canadian law, I think it was B13 or some strange name
Bill
like that.
C16.
B16.
C16.
Where you had to, B60. B what? Be kind.
Doesn't matter.
And required people to be able to use, they should use the pronouns that the recipient wanted to be called by, whether it be he, she, it. And he saw that as an affront against free speech. Am I talking nonsense? Because you guys know him better than I. And that's what catapulted him into YouTube fame. He went on YouTube and said, this is the reasons. He says, not because I hate them, it's an affront to free speech and it's an erosion of values. I think probably he said that. I'm not sure what he said. But then he got a lot of backlash from the left, particularly universities. But then he suddenly got a groundswell of support from the world in general. And that's what catapulted him. But he didn't reference that at all, which I thought would have been a perfect illustration to the chapter, don't do what you hate. And he would have hated to have to use pronouns that he was morally against. Did anyone else notice that, or was it just me that thought, why didn't he use his own story?
I think that's good insight, Dad. I think it would have been easier and less controversial to use an outside story because that also has some specific, it's not so much the restrictions on free speech because he agrees with certain restrictions. There's some things you can't say.
Yeah.
that would be racist or sexist or whatever. But in this specific case, it was because it was imposed speech. And he was saying under common law in the Western world, we've never had an occasion where we've had many occasions where you can stop people saying certain things.
Yes.
For example, that was a joke. But there's never been a case that we've imposed speech on people and made them say certain things. And that was his argument with it.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite a controversial topic and still is a very hot topic at the moment. And I think even one of the subheadings in this chapter was called practicalities. And so he was trying to make it more practical. I think, I mean, who knows? But it wasn't supposed to be a controversial thing or bigging himself up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was clever and perhaps not to. It was very noticeable to me that he's got personal example of standing up, and it changed his life basically to someone who's much more influential and has changed multitudes of people's lives by standing up for that. Not that good will always come out of it for standing up what's right or not doing what you hate. Sometimes you just get poor, you know what I mean? But he's saying at least you'll like yourself better than if you just do what people are imposing on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jaden, what insights did you get? Jaden and Charlotte, maybe.
Go for it, Charlotte.
Okay, so the thing that my insight first one is that relates back to rule number 1. You have to break the rule if that's ridiculous, basically.
Go on that. Talk about that. What was rule number 1?
Do not denigrate the social institution carelessly. But like, for example, workplace, it's a social institution. If they are telling you or the way they do things, it's against your will, or like you obviously you have to think through the reasoning and why you think like that. When you have a strong argument, you can go into the situation and say, I disagree to that because of what. So it's not like carelessly say, I just don't agree and I don't like this and I just get out of that situation, or say, this is wrong, I'm not going to do it. And so that's how I relate it back to rule number 1. And also, like, it's a lot of faith in what you think. That's the lady did process what she think. But I think what's interesting is she ended up deciding not to confront his workplace. She didn't slay that dragon, but she used an other outlet to influence more people and to still do whatever she believes is right. So in that way, it's even better in that way.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Good. Any other chapters that are reference to? Because he's quite good at bridging the rules. We said something about that this afternoon, didn't we, Charlotte? That he does refer back in later chapters to what he said before.
Yes, do not hide your head in the fog. Is there similar in the fog?
Hide your head in the sand.
The fog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I like that he did clearly say you've got to be ready for the consequences of making that choice.
Yes.
So it's not like you say no to that particular thing and all the good things going to happen. It also comes with negative consequences. You've got to overcome your fear. You've got extra work. You've got extra pressure. But do not, the good that you do seems minor because you're as an individual, but do not undermine that the good that you
little
do.
bit of good, yeah.
It will manifest itself. So does the bad things.
Yeah, evil and good are in the little things that manifest and grow in the world.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Seamus, I heard you loved this chapter.
Yeah, I think the one thing I thought was fascinating was how he said humanity
kind of leans towards, what do you say, nihilism or chaos. And and he said, we've got to come into this world and make it a better place.
Michael Jackson said that, I think.
Yeah, go on. Thank you, John.
How did he say that? Was it like the foundation of the world is chaos? Is that why it tends towards chaos?
He didn't explain that, I don't think.
It
Yeah.
makes sense in the Tiamat story that the world is built from chaos, so the foundation of it is chaos. Is that the idea?
I think what he was saying is that society itself is less able to stand up against the denigration, right? So it wasn't in this book, but I remember him doing a lecture about it, and he said he asked his students during the Nazi, concentration camps, do you think the German population if they were to be told about it, or if they were knowledgeable about it, do you think they would have done something about it? And he says that they do these reports and these analyses on human psyche, and he says the vast majority of people don't do anything because it's like you don't want to stick out. We all have this inbuilt thing, well, most of us do. And it's such a challenging thing to think that, I'm going to be the person who's going to say something. Maybe, Mom, you are that person. Maybe Sean.
I like sticking out.
But I think the vast majority of people, when it comes to conflict or to sticking out or saying what they think, A, they're not sure what everyone else thinks, maybe. They're not fortified on their position, as he says in this chapter. And B, it's sometimes too much of a cost because no one else has done it before you. And so it's almost like sometimes you need to be that pioneer and say something that's in that context is outrageous, but it's something you believe.
The fool.
I was just before this watching a video of a student in class in the US just talking his political views, and the teacher off camera was just arguing. And everything he was probably about 16 years old. He was using dictionary definitions, and the teacher was just going off, I'm better than the dictionary, you don't understand. And it was like the whole class was against him, and he was just speaking his mind, but in a very calm manner with a lot of facts. And it seemed like he was the one who was weird in the context. And I think you need to know, I think it's a difficult thing to do, especially if the temperament is not to avoid conflict. Sean, Mom, I think you guys would be the exception.
But Seamus, weren't you the one, or was it Sean at Romsey School? They had, because there'd been some bullying about people who were leaning towards homosexuality. They brought in a couple of guys who were gay and lectured about how good it was and all of that. And one of you asked them, are you happy being homosexual? Was it you or Sean?
I was in that lecture.
That was Seamus.
You and Sean doing the lecture, right?
I wasn't.
Sean was about having sex.
Yeah, there was two about them. Yeah.
Back to the orgies.
No, there was I think it was a second session in school where they were talking about safe sex or safer sex. And one of you stood up and said, Sean, isn't the safest not to have sex? That way you can't get pregnant or get someone pregnant.
And the teachers applauded him.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. I remember. I was very proud of you guys sticking out and saying what you believe.
And
I was actually being sarcastic when I said I liked sticking out. I was talking about my weight.
Thank you for that.
You're definitely the type of person who is able to say your mind. I don't know if you've always been like that, but as you got older, you're a lot more, I don't want to say careless or reckless or over the top. I don't want to say those. What I want to
My mum used to say to us, because we would be embarrassed with some of the things that she'd come out with, and she was a very gentle, sweet little Irish lady, but she spoke her mind. And my mum used to say, we say, Mum, you can't say that. She'd say, don't worry, love, you'll understand one day. Age has its compensations.
Seamus, I think it's funny that you're trying to call out Mom and I, because most people wouldn't do that. Actually, I think you're the perfect candidate. But genuinely, I think you are someone who does stick out.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. If there's injustice, Seamus would be the first one
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, he's always putting his neck out.
Yeah.
Oh, how do I do that? I'm always the nice guy.
Yeah, you might be the nice guy, but you do stick out.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to say that all of us do. We don't mind giving our opinion. We don't mind standing for what we believe in. I think we're all pretty brave like that. Yeah. I think it's just a cultural thing that we've learned.
I don't know. I think it depends a lot on the audience and the intention and what ground there is to gain in the situation. So I've got quite a big group of friends in Sai Kung, and they mostly tend quite left-leaning. So I've been in many conversations where I've thought my thoughts and thought, should I argue this or shouldn't I argue this? And I'm happy in a lot of situations in a big group to not argue it. But if I have one-on-one time with that person, I'm happy to rehash those ideas, and because there could be progress. But when you're in a group mob mentality, it's very hard to say anything counter the norm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's wisdom, actually. But you're not afraid to have that conversation with somebody.
Not afraid, but hesitant, definitely, for different people who are at different stages in how much they believe their ideology, how deep they are into it. And there are certain people, I've told Charlotte when we go see certain people, don't talk about these things. We can talk about this at home, but don't talk about this. And it's not, I don't know if that's doing what you hate or not. I don't know if it fits into that. Because you're not agreeing to what they're saying, but you're just not commenting on it.
I don't think we can agree with everybody about things. And I think there has to be a sensitivity to...
I don't agree with that, Mom.
Told you, you two are the ones that...
There has to be a sensitivity. I mean, I remember working in England in places, and it was amazing how God opened doors for me with people. But people didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I stood for until they came a bit closer. And I would let them come closer because I could see there was something that I could maybe help with, or they needed a friend. But you don't go and spew your guts out and your opinion and everything else with everybody. I don't think that's wise.
Just pick your battle. That's what I have on my notes as well.
Does he say that in this chapter?
No.
No. Okay.
I don't really talk about it. I think what Peterson's trying to make a point about is, what are you involved in? And probably on a daily basis, because I think it was you, Seamus, was saying that feeds us way up to bigger things. And if you don't handle small things, then you give way to the entropy, and you give way to the slipping into mob mentalities and other bad ideas. And that momentum will carry on to the bigger things.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard him again in other lectures talk about how people judge the Germans for the Nazis for what they did, and how they could kill Jews and then go home and feed their 2 kids and, have this wonderful life and think they're doing the Lord's work, and how actually we all have that in us. We all have that ability. And people get offended because how could I ever do that? But we can all get to that point if you shut down that small, quiet voice, as he calls it, of consciousness, and go against that. And then you build up a momentum of that in little things, to the point where potentially, and it's been historic with many different cultures at many different points in time, where you can commit heinous genocidal crimes and think you're doing the right thing.
Funny is the social institutions feed into that. There was a psychologist called Milgram in the US in the 60s, and he did an experiment at Harvard where there was a guy in a lab coat, perceived authority, at Harvard, perceived authority. So it was a social institution that had some gravitas to it. And they hooked up who they thought was another participant to a shocking machine. And they went into another room. Now that was a stooge. Anyway, they were told by this technician to keep upping the voltage. And the stooge was acting as if his heart was starting to palpitate, and then started having a heart attack, and then died and didn't respond at all. And something like 76% of people still were shocking what they thought was a dead body in the other.
Because they were being told.
Yes, because of the perceived authority, because of the social institution. So that dampening of the little voice. And that experiment, its hypothesis was to prove whether or not German people were intrinsically evil or not. That's insane, right? That was their hypothesis. And they found that Americans were just as evil as German people.
It's a mankind issue. It's not a particular culture.
Exactly.
We've all got that ability of that broken atom in us.
Especially when it's gradual, because those things are never immediate. It's like a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until you're familiar and comfortable with it. And suddenly it's this heinous thing and you can't see it anymore.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So having that little voice telling you where the line is and saying, no, this is not good. Listening to that and not doing what you hate. Very valid, I think.
But how does things like watching killing on movies come into play with all of that? Because those are little things that feed your mind, feed your mind, feed your mind. All of that kind of thing is meditating on things that are not good, that we don't like, we don't believe in it, we do hate them, but we allow that in.
Those.
Oh, blood. Love it.
I always smile when we're watching stuff like that.
But that comes down to that little voice. Everyone's a little different, and everyone's a little bit, there's certain things that like I cannot expose myself to that other people, I don't think it bothers them as much. And I have to listen to that voice for myself. If something bothers me, then you don't do it. You know, it's not really, I think it's on an individual basis. That's not saying murdering, watching killing is good, but I really do think it's an individual thing. Oh, just my thought.
I think, Mom, there's a separation between reality and fantasy and entertainment. And there is a very, very loud argument that people make about violence in TV and video games and all of that. My perspective is, if it was true with the amount of young men who play violent video games where the objective is to kill other people and they try and make it graphic and spectacular and blood and glory and gory, you'd have a lot more murders than you do. If that was true, I think people have some sort of intellectual ability to separate entertainment and reality. If you've ever watched any real army footage of people getting sniped or helicopter fired, it's horrific. You can easily tell the difference. You don't watch that stuff. You turn that off. I don't think there's a credible argument. Although a lot of people make it, and it's very loud, I don't think it's credible. We'd see a lot more violent death if it were true.
Do you
Maybe
think
not credible. Do you not think, though, that it does allow a little door to open, that it's more tolerable?
I don't. I've heard Peterson talk about this with the Columbine killers.
Yes.
And they tried to pin that on the Matrix and GTA and certain things. But Peterson went through the suicide note. What would you call that? Like a declaration, basically, before they went in and committed all those murders. And he talked about how these two boys basically just hated the world. It was nothing to do with the video games they were playing. They just had malice for the world. They took nihilism to the extreme, where they thought children were the worst. Like that, those are the ones that should be murdered, because they're going to be turned into these adults. That's how much they hated life itself. Really evil, dark stuff. Akin to, we were talking about the Nazis and how they perpetrated all their terrible crimes. Same sort of thing, where they just hated life itself. I think that's a much bigger factor than, I don't know, shooting someone in the head in a video game.
Do you guys think though that, for instance, like a child exposed to violence is different than an adult exposed to violence,
Computer game violence.
or any like movie violence? Like protecting a child to a certain age, I think definitely makes a difference, because once you hit that threshold of becoming an adult, you can definitely start to like differentiate. That's not real. This is real. But kids do have a hard time. Their imagination is so crazy. Kids, I think, have a hard time making that separation. And I think you do see kids get quite, if kids are exposed to a lot of mature content, there's a real twisting that can happen.
Yes, I agree.
And
Yeah.
I personally feel that even adults, when you're watching content that's not good, it taints you. I believe that.
Power Rangers, until you're 40, 50, just keep away from it.
So for context, everyone, for the 10 people that watch this podcast, the Whaley boys were not allowed to watch most of the fun cartoons. We weren't allowed to watch Lone Star, Ranger, whatever it was, Power Rangers.
Biker Mice from Mars.
Yeah,
Gummy
watch that. Care Bears, weren't allowed to watch that.
Gummy bears.
Gummy Bears.
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, Pokemon was from the devil.
Mom and Dad, we just exposed our children the other night to Gummy Bears and Lone Star.
What?
So,
Whoa.
sorry.
They'd be nightmares.
They did.
And also Timothy Treadle.
And Timothy Treadle. That was the worst one out of the three.
Have there been more violence since?
Yep.
Timothy Treadle really did it.
I do remember there is a psychology study about observation learning. So like kids seeing someone hit the door that's bounced back,
For sure.
and then they will mimic to do the same thing, and then they intensify the harm that they do to that door. So I think, yes, they will.
But there was
Learned.
low ecological validity because it was a rubber doll and it wasn't a real thing, which was the main thing against that. Just to prove my point.
So can I ask a question?
Was that your question?
Don't do what you hate. Have any of you ever walked out of a job because it was just something that you just thought, this is not for me, I am not tolerating this, goodbye?
I had a job in university, and I got it, and I managed 4 hours of it. And my boss was a 16-year-old guy dressed in a suit called Sharpie. My job was to call people on the phone and sell them double glazing windows. It was horrible. I ended up talking to this old man about the World War. I can't do this job because everyone who answered were like, why are you calling me? How did you get my number? Well, it's sequential dialing, sir. And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't do this. There's no purpose. There's no meaning behind this.
Destroying.
So yeah, I walked up 4 hours for that.
Well done.
Anyone else?
I had a similar situation where I was a student. I just finished school, actually, in between school and college. And I got a factory job. One of my friends was there. And the factory job was taking 80 polystyrene cups and putting them into two groups of 40 polystyrene cups and then rewrapping them. And I lasted exactly 4 hours. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I hated it so much and I didn't expect to pay. I just disappeared. At lunch break, I just disappeared.
I didn't know either of these stories.
I remember.
It was terrible. But I've walked away from careers and I've worked my way out of certain arenas on purpose, taking time, developing skill sets, developing knowledge, and then withdrawing from those worlds, knowing that's not the direction I want my life to go. So this message is something that I've taken to heart at a macro level, like deciding the direction I want my life to go. I've applied this in the most practical way, in the most meaningful way that I can. I remember leaving a high-paid banking job, computer screens, trading, all the rest, and looking at my manager, who was 10 years ahead of me, thinking, he looks tired, which I look tired. He looks fat, I look fat. But he just looked like he was hating life, and everything of meaning was in this job. He would work longer than other people, and he was just a horrible person. I remember looking at him thinking, I don't want to be that. And so that was one of the reasons that contributed to me leaving that. And when Bonnie and I got married 11 years ago, she wanted me to go and get a teaching job because I could, and I would have earned a good amount of money, and I could do it quickly. I could just get into the career path. And I said, Bonnie, I'm not doing that. She was angry with me because what I had on the table at that time was tutoring, and it wasn't making nearly what it would have been initially as a teaching job. And she didn't understand where I wanted to go and what I didn't want to do, and that I hated the corporate world. I hated the 9-to-5 mentality. I hated living for the weekend, living for your one holiday a year. I hate everything about that. So I told her, I'm not going to do what I hate. We're not doing that. I'm going in this direction. This is what I want to do. And I would say it was a much more arduous journey, but I love it. I love Mondays. For the most part, you always have down days, but I love Mondays. I love what I do. I love working sometimes 16-hour days, sometimes 20-minute days. And so I think all of us have applied this at a deep level where we've rejected traditional pathways because we don't like it, because we don't want to be stuck in it. How many of us could attest to the majority of the people we know and going, I hate my job, I hate my career, I don't like this, I don't like that, can't wait for Friday night. And we are not those sort of people. We're not looking forward to the Friday night in the traditional sense. We enjoy our time off. But if we wanted a Wednesday off, each of us could take it because we've rejected that.
We talked about it in another podcast once with that employee training they do for like using the right language and cultural diversity training. And you said to me, Sean, it's one of the main reasons we started our own business, is to not have to go through that kind of stuff. So it's one way of avoiding doing what you hate, is just set up your own situation.
And the way that momentum is carried on is one of the things when we set up our touring business, being in certain institutions and knowing how that stuff all plays out, is we don't do staff training. We've done maybe 5 events in 10 years. We don't waste people's time. I always say to the office, which is mainly mom, I'm like, teachers just need to teach. Don't make them do admin. Don't make them do this. We're not going to get them around every Friday to talk for 45 minutes on nothing. Let's just get teachers to teach. And that's one of the biggest gripes for teachers in most career paths is it's all the admin. It's all this extra stuff. It's all the teacher meetings that are pointless and go nowhere because some corporate person, some middle management drone wants to feel important, but it has very little practical value or effect. It just slows and it's just sand in the machinery. And so by us making this choice not to be corporate drones, and there are people in the corporate world who do things and it's all wonderful and all the rest, and they really enjoy it, wonderful. But a large majority of it, 80% of it, is just drudgery.
We've been there, we've done it.
So the knock-on effect of us avoiding that, not doing what we hate, is when we do something, we build it so that people actually can be in the places that they enjoy, the actual space where they actually get a maximum benefit, not just jumping through hoops to make the machine work. And one of the big things that we all are striving to do is to find zones where we enjoy. So Seamus, one of the big things that you have been struggling with for years is being stuck as a teacher and you're very good at it, but then you get stuck in that role and actually you want to do other things and manage things and lead people and grow teams. And so we're very conscious, like, let's not leave Teacher James stuck in that hole. There's a conscious effort to put him in a place and that's your responsibility, Shay, to put yourself in a place where you're doing what you love, not the thing that you have to do or the thing that you could do. And I think that's the same for all of us.
What's good to see is you making that choice for yourself, not doing what you hated, manifested in the world 30-fold, roughly. How many employees have you got not doing what they hate?
Yeah, 25, yeah.
Then you get Seamus doing the same thing, and he'll have his employees and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that begs the question then, are there ever times you have to do what you hate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Peterson answers that question. He says right at the end of the chapter, he says, sometimes you have to be the fool and you have to work from the ground up and learn the skills and empty the garbage bin and do this and do that. He's basically, yeah, I think there's definitely times where you gotta work towards your dream.
Does he not draw a distinction there between doing what you think you're too good for and what you hate?
Yeah.
He says, don't think you're above where you should be.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily doing what you hate, it's just doing what maybe is a more humble choice or starting at the bottom where you should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if he says, yeah, do what you hate. It's like change your mindset.
Yeah, but the other idea is being the fool is like you've got to take on things to be able to learn. And everyone, when you're young, you think you're the next hot shot. You're going to be, driving a Benz and doing this and doing that. But actually, you have to start somewhere, and you've got to learn the skills. So if anyone ever comes to do I know this summer we're going to have a few young people going to come and try out just to be assistants in the classroom. And they might never be teachers in their lives, but I always tell them, you're going to learn how to communicate. You're going to learn how to be patient. You're going to learn how to be punctual. And those are skills that you can take anywhere you go. But that's below me. I want to do this. But actually, a lot of these starting positions, don't look down on it, especially if you're young.
I think there's something to be said. I'm going to steal Gary Vee's terminology here. Something to be said at a micro level and then at a macro level. At a micro level, you do everything that your hands can find to do, and you do it the best of your ability. And so if it's emptying garbage bins, you do that
Well,
better than anyone else. You make sure you clean the toilet. You make sure you file that piece of paper. You make sure you send the emails on time with the correct things. You make sure you adopt the boss's punctuation, his stylings. Does he do 2 spaces? Does he do single lines? Whatever, you do that thing the best that you can at a micro level. But then at a macro level, you want to be moving out of pathways that you don't enjoy. And you actually figure out the things you don't enjoy by experimenting, by playing, by doing the best that you can. Sometimes you don't enjoy something just because you're not exerting yourself. You're not putting energy into it. And when you actually do apply yourself properly, you find out, hey, actually, I like this thing. A lot of people half-ass their careers or half-ass their jobs so they don't get anything out of it. Well, screw you. You are just going to be a drone. If you put your effort into something at a micro level, you'll be much more attuned to figuring out at a macro level where you're going, and more importantly, where you're not going.
Yeah, very good.
Do you know, I think, back to babies again, I think when you're training your children, and this is what I think is missing a large part in the world today, because women are all back at work trying to be equal to men. When you're training your children, and like you, Sean, today, you're saying to Sammy, laps up, and you're teaching him to pick things up and put them in the bin. That's teaching him a method and a responsibility and a reaction to something that somebody in his authority is saying. And so then, like Esther's at the place now where she's teaching the children to set the table and to clear their things from the table. And unless we do those things, this thing of having a helper to do everything for our children is not actually helping our children to grow capacity at all. And so those are things that when they become university graduates, they hate doing. They hate doing it because they've never learned the capacity or built the capacity to take care of all those little things so they can go and conquer the big things and go and, win the battles. And so it really doesn't help to not have people training their children to do the daily things like emptying their dustbins, making their beds, blah, blah, blah.
Which takes it back to Peterson's first rule, which is clean
Yeah.
your room.
Yeah.
You start out by making your bed, organize your stuff,
Yeah.
which then has that.
I wonder if we took this book and took it to 60 years ago, what people would think of it then.
I think it would be much more agreed upon than it
Yeah.
is in today's age. I think a lot of these things are just good old fashioned values.
I think the people that are so, enamored with this book would be, 60 years ago, would be looking at it and going,
Of course.
yeah, well, what's
Of course, yeah.
why
That's
would you
how it
write a
works.
book about this? This is how it works. We
Yeah.
know this. So there really is something to be said about millennials, really.
Feeling hurt.
Also, parents back then, like I think of my grandfather, if you didn't listen to them, they smashed the hell out of you. Like there was no like let's
Yeah.
negotiate with our kids. Like I got smashed a couple times and I didn't even know it was coming because I was just like a bit oblivious. He'd be like, "Don't do that," and you'd be like, "What? I think he's joking. What, this?" And he'd just lift up, it's a stick he found and just smash you with it, and you're like, "Whoa!" So like it's such a different. It was just such a different time. So kids very much paid attention, and they were very they did what they were told.
And tell me, when he did that to you, did you cry about your rights?
I cry. I definitely felt it was unfair on some levels because we often didn't really see it coming.
Yeah, but
Or
about your rights. How dare you? I have my rights.
no, because I was scared.
That's what happens today.
So let me ask you, Mum, what was wrong with the previous generation that they raised such a crap millennial generation?
I think
The people slightly younger than us,
I think that
I think you better think about that. That's right.
no. I have thought about this a lot. I think women's lib has undone women in society, and I really believe that. I think women are the most amazing creatures. I think we are incredible beings, but we've sold ourselves short. And hear this, what I'm saying this, we have sold ourselves short trying to be equal to men. And that's not undermining men at all. I really think that women are really unique and special. And we've sold that uniqueness, trying to do what man does. It doesn't work. I want to see women empowered. I want to see women taking back what is rightfully and really theirs. And that's to be those women that embrace men, embrace their children, and see the values, because we see everything. We like that guy Ganga, what's his name? Mark Ganga. He talks about the woman's brain is connected with wires.
Oh, laugh your way to okay.
And men just have boxes. And women are like that. And I think that's part of who we are. And to take that and embrace that again.
Is the
So we
reverse?
can blame women, is what you're saying, is we can blame women for the crap millennial generation and why Peterson has a platform.
But is it also men trying to be women?
No, I think that there is a chauvinism that had to be leveled down. It did. It's not nice, and I don't think men. There's a gentler side to men. Men can be pigs if you let them. They can, and I think that needed to be leveled down. There is a place for women's liberation. There is a place for all of that. But I think we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Or the bra?
I think the book would have had a good effect 60 years ago because it would have explained how we got to this norm. And I think when you have discipline getting smacked around by someone without the why, I think that's when you raise a generation that's not going to do discipline to their kids.
Yeah, I was going to mention about my mom. Like they definitely went in a different direction because they felt, she and her siblings felt that some of it was definitely unfair. And there was never an explanation. There was never like, how do you feel? How do you think this could be better next time? Or There's no kind of comprehension behind it often. It was just a rule, and a very hard rule. And then if you didn't follow it, you'd get like a very big beating. So yeah, they
Using
definitely all had issues related to that.
Using the last book, you could explain to your child now, I don't want to let you do anything that makes me hate you. And these are the reasons why, because I want you to be accepted in society. I want you to do well. It's very different to just getting smacked because that's what their dad did, which is what their dad did.
Yeah.
So I think the book would have been profound 60 years ago. Maybe would have stopped a lot of the problems that we're experiencing today.
Can I ask the question? So if your dad just gave you smack without explaining why would you pass it on to the next generation if you hated something?
It's probably easier than trying to work out why.
No, I think what Esther's experiencing is the grandfather smacked without the why, so that the parents went the other direction.
Yeah, they smacked us, but they definitely looked for an alternative. And they made that quite clear. Because my mom would get angry at my grandpa for smacking us the way that he smacked them, or at least in a similar style, because she often felt it was unjust. So.
But to be fair, Esther, I mean, if I was your grandfather, I'd also just smack you.
Shaman, you know what? We met him and he was just such a dear, dear man, such a lovely man.
Yeah, he'd do it with a smile on his face.
But I think that was a lot of that generation, you know.
But my uncles too were shits, and they'd wind us up, and then we'd get smacked. It wasn't funny often. Like us, me and my brothers will talk about it, and they have instances where it's a similar thing. It's things that happened to me, and they're just like, hated them for it because they'd get in big trouble for stuff, and my uncles would have just provoked them behind the scenes. There's all kinds of crap that went on with that.
I like the quote, rules without relationship leads to rebellion.
That's very true.
Very often you see that in families where you've got authoritarian just going, you know, you'll do what I say because I'm an authority. And if you don't have that relationship, often when the parent is looking away, the kids are rebelling.
Yeah.
And so,
and my uncles were like that. They'd be off in the shed doing whatever they got up to with their friends. They would just keep it a secret.
It's gonna be
very rebelling.
They might watch this, Jaden. So
lovely.
So,
Hi, guys.
Seamus and Esther, how do you discipline your kids then? Having the perceived negative experience of your grandfather smacking your parents and you, Esther, and then, like, how do you guys discipline your kids?
Smash the hell out of them.
Sometimes.
I leave that to you when it really gets bad.
I think that's, like I said, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. I was talking to two moms the other day, and they were against smacking because they said that violence breeds violence. And I was saying, actually, a father disciplines those who loves. And especially we've got two boys, the quickest and the most easiest way for them and for us is to apply the rod of learning to the seat of understanding, right? And we tested it out different ways. And by 5, if you communicate your values through how you discipline. And if you can communicate and be consistent, then a lot of the battle's already won. And so we've definitely been in times where we just use the stick too much because it's our last, you know, we're frantic and we're at chaos. And then there's moments where we hit it right and we hit it right. We hit the smooth point and we're able to not just correct their behavior, but correct their attitude.
But one thing good I picked up from my parents that was very clearly communicated to us for what, you know, despite whatever else was well done or not well done, they were big on, because my grandfather would smack them and he'd be angry. Like they would, you know, get mad at them and then they'd have an angry, a very kind of traumatic experience. And so my parents were big on that you don't smack when you're angry. And I've taken that to heart because I can get really mad and really like emotional. And I really try to like to do it in a measured way that I'm not just reacting. Because that
can
made
lead
very
to
clear to me
abuse.
that's where abuse starts.
Absolutely.
It's smashing when you're angry.
You keep saying smashing. If anyone's listening to this, they're going to probably get upset.
No, if you're angry, you would smash. Like that's kind of what ends up happening.
You smack the thumb with the stick.
Yeah.
Spank.
Spank
A
now.
little spank on their rusty discs.
Spank has become weird now too.
How do you discipline Sammy, John? What's your methodology?
Well, he's very young, so I mean, what is he? 15 months. So there's very little that we can do, because if he doesn't understand something, it's not fair to smash him. But for maybe 6 months, I mean, you guys might remember better than me, but I've been teaching him there's some things I don't want him to touch. For example, plugs. So his very first encounter with plugs, it was a conscious choice. It wasn't something I thought about afterwards. The first time he encountered a plug, I would shake my finger at the thing, not at him, at the thing, which I thought was quite clever. So he understood that's the object I don't want you to touch. And then I associated the wagging of the finger with moving his hand away. So it wasn't a punishment. It wasn't painful. It was just, no, you can't touch this thing. To the point now, you guys have all done it with him, and you've at least seen it, where he'll walk up to plugs and he will wave his own finger at the plug, knowing that's not something he's allowed to touch. But in the last 2 weeks, I've got a new laptop, crap camera, but new laptop, and I don't want him touching it because I don't want him to break it. So when he comes close to it, I wave my finger. No, but it's just too interesting. It's too new. It's shiny. He wants to touch it. So he touches it. So I move his hand, wag my finger. No. He goes, yes. Then looks up at me and touches it. So I got a little stick out. Just a little, it's basically the end of a spatula. And I put that thing next to the laptop. We try a third time. Of course, he touches it, touches the screen. So I take the stick out. I go, no. And I smack his bum. And he was so shocked. He looks at me like, what's this new level of, this is unfair. I didn't even think this was possible. And so to test me, to see, is this the boundary now? He touches it again. And of course, I smack his bum again. And I'm not like, I hate you. I'm just teaching him, don't touch this thing. So now he knows the line, but he still wants to touch it. So every now and again, he'll test that boundary again, and he'll look at me, he'll bring his finger close, around, and then sort of bump it. And I'm because he's a bright boy, obviously, I make sure I'm on it. I make sure I have that thing, and I smack him on the bum, and he knows, okay, he caught me. He doesn't cry. He doesn't panic. He doesn't think that I hate him. He just understands, oh, here's a boundary. And so it's a very low level. He's very young, but it's just, in essence, it's giving him a boundary, and then I'm consistent with that. If I wasn't consistent with that, that's not fair on him.
That is the key.
Yeah, because then, oh, why can I touch it today, but I can't touch it tomorrow? And the other thing, just from my perspective, is I want him to touch as much as he can. I want him to play with things. I want him to go off the garden path. I want him to explore. So I will give him sharp things and different things. I think I'm trying to make him exposed to as much as possible. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm right there with him. He's very careful. He's not a crazy boy. He'll stab himself or whatever, which some kids, everyone's got a different temperament. And so it's not like I'm prohibiting every action that he's doing. I've got to choose, okay, I'm going to enforce this boundary and this boundary and this boundary, and then be consistent as possible. So if he wants to play with the cup and pour water over himself, I'm not going to be, no, come on, no, constantly. Tonight, he was pouring water all over himself. I'm like, happy, that's fine, play with the water. But when I set a boundary, we're going to enforce that. And so I only set boundaries that I know I can consistently enforce. Otherwise, I'm going to become inconsistent. I'm going to be someone you can't really trust, because is today a day I can do this thing or not? Yeah. And then, of course, I've never been angry with Sammy. I'm sure at some point that opportunity will arise. But up until this day, I've never been angry with him. So I can't say that's even a thing in my mind to say that I'll smack him out of anger. It's absolutely possible. I have it in me. We have grouse blood. But at this point in time, it hasn't.
Oh,
Ask
good.
a question. So Esther, earlier when you said when you feel angry, you remind yourself that you can't smack at that point. Would that disturb the pattern of like consistency then?
No, you just give yourself a moment. You can tell them they're going to get a smack, but you wait until you're calm. They'll still get it.
Smack the hell out.
And that, no, but you just make sure you're in control. That's not to say, like, I definitely get mad sometimes, but I definitely have learned to rein it in. Yeah, it could be worse. Like my mom, I have very clear memories of a couple times where I was pretty traumatized because she would get mad and then it would just go on and on and on for whatever reason. And so I kind of have those memories very clear in my memory of where not to go. And after those instances, she very intentionally went on a parenting course. And they had this thing about no more than 3 smacks, but make them good kind of thing. And don't do it when you're angry. And so that kind of like, it always kind of stuck with me. That's not to say I'm perfect, but I struggle with consistency. That's my struggle. So it's
Seamus
good
and
to
Jaden.
start saying like pick specific things and then just stick to those because I struggle with that.
Sorry, Esther, I interrupted. Seamus and Jane, do you remember how we were disciplined?
Perfectly.
Remember, Dad used to make us go to the cupboard, and we would have to choose a belt or a shoe if we were getting a smack. He would like add a layer of the psychological discipline. So we'd go into the cupboard and like hit ourselves with shoes and try and see which one is least painful. And then we would hear him marching down to the bedroom. We're like, okay, this one. Smack us with something we had to choose.
But why a shoe? I've never understood that.
It's
So it was either a shoe or a belt.
a flip.
Why a flip-flop? It's so weird.
You should try it out.
Never ever used our hands.
James, have you got a
Maybe
flip-flop in the house? Could you just show Esther how it works?
But like, you know, back in the day, they'd get you to go pick your stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to go outside and go pick a stick. That made more sense. A shoe.
Yeah, shoot.
Little bit grass.
No, a flip flop, Esther, because it would sting.
And it made a loud noise.
Made a noise and it would sting.
Okay, I've never.
But also,
experienced-
it wouldn't leave this incredible mark because it was a flat surface area, whereas a stick would leave a welt or even make you bleed.
Oh yeah, we always had rings on our bums from the needle. That was our classic. Like, you know, they'd given it to you good, and there's like 3 massive welts on your butt that didn't go away for a week.
You couldn't sit down.
I'm usually like, there needs to be some kind of mark left, otherwise we haven't given them a good one.
I will say this: when you guys disciplined us, you would spend as much time as you needed to get us to recognize where we had gone wrong, and you would pray with us, and you wouldn't just hit us; you would work it through, and by the end, somehow you convinced us that we deserved it.
Can you 3 boys remember what our boundaries were?
Yeah.
Go on.
Don't direct disobedience and lying. Those are the 2 things.
Do you all remember that clearly?
Jaden doesn't. He didn't have.
I used to pick a belt and then they would hit the bed really loudly with it. So you guys would think I was getting
Consistency's key.
We only ever smacked you for those 2 things. You used to break things and fight and whatever. You never got smacks for that. It was only when you lied or when you were directly disobedient, when you knew and you were warned and you even said back to us, I know if I do this, I'm going to get it. And only after that did you get it. Is that right?
So by that logic, you must have spent more time with Seamus than Sean and I. put
There was a
together.
time we spent ages.
If you were spending that long going through why we're doing this and talking about it, he must have just been talking to you guys all day long.
Maybe that's why he was so naughty.
You know, one of the things I tell the kids at school, I said, I was an avid liar, for those who are listening in, those 10 people. And I would lie about anything with no advantage. And we had this rule that for a week, we weren't allowed to have any sugar or candy. And I had found some money at school, and I went to the tuck shop and I bought myself a lunch bar, a chocolate bar, and I ate it. And like an idiot, I put the wrapper back in the lunchbox and I went home. Mom picks it up and goes, "Whose is this?" And suddenly she could see my face go like pale white. And I thought, oh no. I said, and I made up an excuse, something like someone else's wrapper or something. But my mom, you gave me a hiding, right? And then you said to me something like, "Do you know that if you didn't lie and just told me the truth, you wouldn't have got a smack?"
Yes.
And then the economics and the maths get about, oh, this is how the rules work.
The
You
rules.
can break the rules, just don't lie. And that was the value that was put into us, because we're like, okay, lying is not a thing that you do. Break the rules, no problem.
But wasn't it direct disobedience
Yeah.
to break the rules?
But that phrase of, you wouldn't have got a smack if you had just told the truth. Made
It was always very open. They
Yeah.
told me, if you want to smoke, tell us. I told them, and they bought me the cigarettes.
And then
I almost threw up. They made me smoke 2 of them back to back. I think there was a video of it. I went completely green.
We wanted you to hate it.
Sean,
It
play
worked
that clip
worked
now.
for 2 years.
How did that work out?
It worked for 2 years. I didn't go smoke in secret or anything for at least 2 years.
It's good.
I actually, when I first hang out with you and you tell me how your parents discipline you, I said to you, I like how your house work, because everything is so clear and so easy to follow. So if it is straightforward, then
Easy to enforce.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just 2 rules. It's not like tons of rules. You can't do this and you can't do that and that and that and that. And then the list just go on and on. But 2 is so strict and easy to enforce, I guess.
We had a lot of fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
We wanted to enjoy our kids. We wanted to have, we were quite young when we had them, so we wanted to grow up with them. And I hear mums today and that, no, don't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you mustn't do that. No, no, no. And I just think, yeah, man, your life is boring. Your life's just a drag. Why don't you enjoy these kids? You know? I think
It doesn't mean
it's
that
a
they wouldn't
value.
get disciplined for like other things, like not doing homework or whatever. There'd be some consequence, but we kept the smacking for those 2 rules. This was like the last resort. But if they hadn't done their homework, then maybe they had to finish it double, or something less consequential.
They had to make sacrifices, and I think that's a very valuable thing to talk about here. Is we have to learn that we've got to graft, we've got to work, and we have to make sacrifices sometimes for not having done what we should do. We've got to learn to be accountable and responsible. So yeah, that thing of, don't do what you hate. I think there's some aspects of that where you have to do what you hate.
But I think Peterson's talking more on a moral.
Yeah, but let me finish.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you, as I was saying earlier on, if you build the capacity to get those things done and out the way, then it's not even a thing you do hate, because you just get on so you can have fun. So you
In
can
his
have,
example with that woman, he said she had to know herself well. She had to delve into what she hated and not. And like, I think if you really broke down your hierarchy, it's clear what you hate isn't what you don't enjoy doing or what you think is tedious. It's a different thing to what you hate. So I think before you just go around saying, I hate this, I hate this, I hate going to work, you really have to nail down what it is you want to do and what it is you don't want to do. I don't think it's a flippant thing.
And you
Yeah.
can't really know that until you've done lots of jobs.
Flippers. They're flipping.
Yeah.
I think that's a great note to end the podcast on. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Sorry Bonnie wasn't with us tonight. She is fat and lazy.
She's lost what? How many kgs? She's not fat and lazy.
I think she's
4.
lost 4.
Yeah.
I'll get a confirmation on that. But the weight loss challenge is going well. I think Jaden, you've lost 2, Shay? 4. I've lost 4.5. So you fatties, you better catch up. And Esther has lost 3. Are you doing it, Esther?
Oh.
Yeah, just a little bit. I don't have a lot too long to go.
Wow.
Well
Brilliant.
done.
Well done. The weights are getting lighter. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Love you all. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
I know how sad that is, but people drink this stuff up. That at the beginning.